Well, guess what? It's time for .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers. I'm your host in New London, Connecticut, Carl Franklin. As always, in Alabama tonight, Mark Dunn.
That's right. Once again in Alabama.
Down in Alabama.
That's right. Down south.
So, what's new, man?
Not much. I'm down doing one of the two-day .NET seminars here in Alabama.
Very cool.
Weather's been beautiful today.
Excellent. Weather has sucked here over Memorial Day weekend. Absolutely horrible. Rain. Cold rain. No snow, but, rain's bad enough. Didn't get to see any parades because it was raining too hard, which kind of blows.
That's amazing. The weather was excellent when I was up there, and I was just up there, I guess, Monday through Wednesday.
You're in Hartford?
Yeah, I was up in Hartford.
Yep. Yeah, it's fine. It was beautiful today, but unfortunately it didn't hold out. That's the thing about New England, the weather kind of stinks.
So did you do anything special to celebrate Memorial Day?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. I went over to my brother's house and got together with a fam. Got all the kids together. Between my brother and I, we have 5, and they're all sort of in the same, within the same 8-year span, so they get along. And, put some chicken on the barbecue and had a good time. It was we got to talk shop a little bit. He's a Java developer, unfortunately working at a company that where the top people are beginning to panic about results. And he was telling me some stories. He's getting a little nervous. The top guys wanting to... Well, first of all, they don't have an architecture team. Then we don't have time for that. Just write the code. And
yep, we've all been there before.
Yeah. And secondly, he's thinking that, here are the requirements. Okay, a week goes by. Hey, how come there's nothing? How come there's no code? Well, we've been doing this, and that, and the other thing. Oh, that's good. He's sort of freaking out, walking around, and, we think he's getting pressure from the top to produce.
Well, why didn't he, leave the evil world of Java and jump over to .NET?
Well, my brother is, he's a career guy. He needs a steady salary. He's got 3 kids and a budget, and not entrepreneurial like myself. So he likes the steadiness of that salary job, and which is okay, but so he's not about to bail unless, of course, he just can't take it anymore.
Right.
And find something better. But, he feels lucky to have a job in this economy.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. I mean, things have been bad. I'm really starting to see the training industry turn around now.
Yeah,
I mean,
really
are
has.
you not seeing the same thing?
I have in our company. We really took off this year. We've been doing a lot of training, which is interesting. A lot more people have been paying out of their own pocket, though.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. A lot of walk-in students.
Yeah. We actually had, I think it was for the month of May or April. I think it was the month of April. We had a class here, and we offered half price for unemployed people. And, 3 or 4 people took us up on it, so we got a lot of good feedback from that.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to do.
And we may do that again in the future, but we'll see.
So who's on the agenda tonight, Carl?
Tonight is a really exciting guest. I enjoyed immensely the last time he was on. And so many things have changed in this world and in his world since he was on before. He now works for Microsoft, and I'm sure has lots of things to say about the future.
Boy, this is a setup.
Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hey, Carl, how are you?
I'm laughing because, in your email when I asked you if you'd like to be a guest again, you said, okay, but don't ask me anything about the future. And I said, okay. So maybe we could talk about this. And you said, yeah, that'd be cool, but don't ask me anything about the future.
Well, the reason I said that was because my first ever talk as a Microsoft employee, I just went expecting to talk about the present, And those people knew almost everything about the present. It took me like 20 minutes to find a topic they didn't already know inside and out. And then at the end, of course, they did exactly what I would have done had I been in their shoes.
Right.
They raised their hands and he said, "What can you tell me about blah, 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 v.next?"
You must feel like Colin Powell at a press conference.
And, I just, having never given a talk as a Microsoft employee before, I didn't see that coming.
Right.
When I did it, when people asked me those questions as a contractor, I could just say, "I don't know. I don't work at Microsoft." But that doesn't work anymore, right? I can't give that answer anymore.
Well, I'm sure you don't want to say, "I know, but I can't tell you." You've got to work around that
I
somehow.
can't say that. And I want, I have a fragile ego like all public speakers, right? I want them to like me. So I want to answer all of their questions. And idiot that I was, I didn't even clear with, it happened to be a WinForms talk. And they were asking about the next version of WinForms. And I know the guys in the WinForms team. I could have went and asked, "Hey, what can I say about WinForms, v.next?" I didn't even think to do it.
Well, you did better than me. I would have been giving out Bill Gates' cell number at that point, whatever it took.
Come to think of it, I could probably find Bill Gates' cell number. That's scary.
So we all want to know what it's like. You've drank the Kool-Aid. You've gone over to the other side. What's it like coming from, Developmentor to Microsoft?
Well, actually, the interesting part about working at Developmentor, I actually wrote an essay about the internals of Developmentor one time, because it was run by two guys who owned the company 50-50, and they really ran both of their halves very differently. The technical side was run kind of very much like a meritocracy. It was very much technically, you'd throw your ideas out there and people would pound them into submission, and you kind of developed calluses around your brain and the ability to communicate.
Right.
Right? Or you died.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it was survival of the fittest. Whereas the business side of the company was very much hierarchical, chain of command, this person's responsible for that, and, that's just how that part of the company worked. And, going to a giant company, in fact, I've worked at a giant company. I worked at Intel, which is very much hierarchical, chain of command, kind of you do your little part, and it's your boss's job, hopefully, to know more than you, and so on all the way up the chain. And certainly Microsoft has that. And, if Bill is like level 1 of that organization, right? He is the top guy. And I'm 9. And there's like 50,000 people, right, at Microsoft, and I'm just, I'm at the bottom.
But, if I was Bill and I like to program, and I know he likes to, he likes code, obviously, I'd want to hang out with guys like you rather than guys like, I've been
there for a month. He's never called. He's never emailed. I'd be happy. But on the other hand, to be fair, I haven't given him the opportunity, right? I didn't say, "Hey, I'm new here. You want to hang out?"
Yeah, maybe he's waiting for your invitation.
Maybe that's it. Maybe he's just shy.
He could
be. But the thing that's interesting about Microsoft is there is that hierarchy, but it's really the meritocracy is very strong there too.
Right.
It's very much, what can you think of that day that sounds cool? And sometimes you got to be careful because, you wander into your boss's office and you go, "Oh, I had this great idea. We should really do this and this and this and this other thing." And he looks at you and he says, "Great. When can we have it?" Right?
I want to schedule by tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's great because that means that, if you think big and you have good ideas and, you can express them well and you can convince people that those are good ideas and those are things that should be done, people will, they'll respond. They'll volunteer. They'll get a room on their time off and help you to achieve those things.
That's very cool.
It is very cool. It's enormously cool.
Absolutely.
It certainly sounds like you're having fun, Chris.
Yeah, I am. My month there has been very rich.
What team are you actually on, and what is your title there?
So I am yet another program manager at Microsoft, yet another PM, the guys that you see swarming around the conferences, the only ones that ever actually kind of stick their nose out in public generally. And those are the ones with the most responsibility and the least authority. And officially, I am kind of a subgroup of program manager, which is the content strategist. And I work on MSDN. I'm, that part of MSDN where you go, well, you can go to msdn.com or, that part is my group. There's about 100 people there.
Great.
And I'm at the bottom of that group, too.
So what's that like, that site and working on that site from the inside out?
Well, it's interesting because, I've had my own little site and all the little things that I wanted to do on my site, and I could go and implement those features. And even implementing those features on my little tiny site, sometimes I've had to have help, contractors, artists, and I've had to do all that myself to make it work the way I want it to work. Now, and again, my site was at, the bottom of popularity. Microsoft's site is like in the top 3 or 4 in terms of popularity on the web. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure that they have to keep that site up and running all the time. I mean, they have
it's Unix, right?
People.
No, I'm kidding. It's Unix, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
SCO. Yeah.
No, it's yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's all. Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, it's all eat our own dog food, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, they're in the middle of a big. My understanding is they're in the middle of a big upgrade to make the whole thing run in .NET 1.1.
Right. That's incredible. The reason that I'm laughing there is, there's been some stuff in the press about Microsoft licensing SCO for some stuff, and it's no. I hear all the conspiracy theories. It just makes common sense. They're just anteing up like everyone else. They're paying their dues. They're using it. They're licensing it. Good. Let them pay for it. What's the problem here?
Well, the problem is, of course, nobody else wants to, and so when we do, it just makes.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah. You must be getting the sense now that, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I've realized that, watching the mud fly, and watching Microsoft, support their positions and things. It's very easy to have the. They're the big dog, they must come down attitude. But and so many people have it that it must just get tiring.
Well, I certainly, on the outside made my share of probably more than my share of Microsoft practices. We certainly have a PR issue in terms of how we come across to our customers, unfortunately. But and so, when I went inside, I expected to find all of these people sitting around, right, trying to figure out how to gouge money out of their customers. I know. We'll we'll license it this way and make them stand on their left knee and howl at the moon before we give them the upgrade.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not what happens at all. I mean, there's just tens of thousands of people sitting around saying, what can we do to work with our customer better? How do we make them more happy? How do we make them like us?
Yeah, that's a big problem. Listen, I got an instant messenger from a guy who's sort of been interested in .NET, but not taking the full plunge, and therefore he doesn't really understand a lot of things, even though I've explained it to him numerous times. And so he says, hey, I see Borland is coming out with their own C# development environment. He says, does that spell the beginning of the end for Microsoft? And I said, what?
He's eating mushrooms. I mean, give me a break.
Are you kidding? That's great for Microsoft. Why do you foresee that as being a problem?
Yeah, I mean, as more and more third parties, build .NET-based products.
Yeah.
That just validates
That's great.
the whole utility of .NET.
I actually just heard today that PowerSoft's, or actually Sybase owns it now, but PowerBuilder is making PowerScript a .NET pluggable
That's
language.
great.
It makes sense. I mean, that's the way the industry's going.
Yeah. Yeah, I just couldn't believe that. And then he goes, ha ha, I was joking. It's like, no, you weren't. You have no clue. Let me explain it to you. Yeah. He's thinking that since if Borland can make a better C# than Microsoft, then why do we need Microsoft? And I'm thinking, you just don't get it.
Well, I hope Borland does make a better C# than Microsoft.
Absolutely.
Nothing is better for customers than competition.
That's right. It'll keep Microsoft on their toes, but at the end of the day, they're still going to run a Windows app against the .NET framework.
And that's goodness.
That's good.
That's right. Still running on a Windows operating system.
Or what is it called now, Chris, actually? Can we call it the .NET framework still, or?
It's definitely a .NET framework.
Okay. The Windows .NET framework, maybe?
Oh, geez, I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe.
Okay. We'll check back in a couple of months and see what happens.
I think it's Windows Server 2003 and the Microsoft .NET framework.
Okay. Good enough.
But, I'm not the marketing guy.
And we're not talking about Longhorn tonight, right?
Well, we can say that it's cool.
It's very cool. We've talked about it a little bit with here and there, some of the things that we've heard about it.
I can say
for
two
some
things
people
about
that
Longhorn.
don't know, what is Longhorn?
What's that, Mark?
I said for some people that don't know, what is Longhorn?
That's a good thing to start with.
So Longhorn is the code name for the next operating system from Microsoft.
And this isn't just a server. This is going to be client, server, whatever, right?
It's the next version, and
next
typically
version.
Microsoft goes back and forth between server and client OSs.
Oh, okay.
They just shipped a server one.
Okay. That makes sense.
So besides what it is, I can say two things of substance about Longhorn. Number one is I saw, about 2 weeks before my interview at Microsoft, I spent 2 days doing like a kind of insider's preview of it. And I so fell in love. And I was skeptical, right? Another operating system? I love the ones we have. Why do we need new ones? And I so fell in love with it in that 2 days that I was, begging for the job when they offered it to me.
Cool.
To come and do the Longhorn Dev Center. I mean, they
Cool.
gave me a long list of jobs that I could come and take, and that was the one, hands down, I wanted, just so I could, do stuff with it, because that was that cool. And, I've been doing Windows stuff for a while now, and I like to think I'm an above-average resistance to just plain old cool. And this
I
was,
would
wow.
agree. Wow.
Okay, and then the
so
other
this
thing
is the bomb, you said.
is besides the fact that Longhorn made me, want to sell my soul to come to work for Microsoft.
Oh, man.
Is to everyone should go to the PDC.
Okay.
That'll be the first public glimpse of Longhorn.
The Professional Developers Conference.
The Professional Developers Conference in Los Angeles on October 27th.
Okay.
Actually, it starts on the 26th, Sunday.
Great. Chris, I have your excellent book, Essential.net, that you and Don Box wrote.
So first and foremost, Don wrote every single word in that book.
Oh.
I didn't write any of it.
Well, then what's your name on it for?
My name on it is because I was his first trusted pair of eyes.
Aha.
And in many cases, but even before he would write something, we
Wow.
would brainstorm about the story and the right way to approach the topic.
Oh, okay, but he did most of the writing, but
He did
still,
all
it was a
of the writing,
collaboration.
100% of the writing.
But it was a
Except
collaboration.
for, my little red pen in the margins.
All right, but it was a collaboration content-wise, you would say?
It was definitely a collaboration. It was, like I said, I was, chief technical editor once he'd written something, and many times I read the chapter and commented on it 2-3 times before anyone else saw it.
That's very
cool.
cool.
We would go round and round to perfect it in terms of what we thought was right before we even sent it to a single.
Well, let me just tell you that, and tell the listeners here that even if you're a VBNet programmer, and you don't, and you can read C#, this is definitely a good book to have. I mean, it is essential, and if you want to know what's really going on, if you want to understand the computer science behind the .NET framework and why it does what it does and how it does it so well, you ought to get this book. Nothing will take the mystery out of the .NET framework like this book. It is incredible.
Wow. I haven't seen the book yet, so is this about the .NET framework, or is it about the internals of the common language runtime, or all of the above?
Well, the framework is really, the common language runtime and the libraries and the compilers, right? So this book is very much about the common language runtime.
Yep. And
as well as, the libraries that are important to, when you're discussing that topic.
Right. It's very good. Very good conceptual models. Very good clear text. Interesting. Great. Yeah, I particularly like the first few chapters, where he's talking about what an app domain is and what a thread is, and and how that all works.
Don
I got a
is
lot
just
out of that.
A master of building up from the atoms.
Yeah.
He really does well.
Yep.
And the other thing that's great about Don's book, I mean, it's one of those books you can pick up and just read again and again and gain new insight and
Right.
gain more knowledge about the framework.
Yeah.
And he's really, I mean, this is the, he did the same thing with Essential Calm, which is a classic still to this day. And just, as short as a couple of years ago, I was trapped in a hotel room with nothing to do and a copy of Don's book, and I started flipping through Essential Calm, just looking something up. And I found myself reading it again, just for the pleasure of it. And I really feel that what Don produced this time is definitely on that same caliber.
And we'll get back to Chris Sells in just a minute. In the meantime, I want to share with you a few letters that we got by email. Brian Schorer from Anheuser-Busch says, after I discovered .NET Rocks, I listened to all 25 shows in about a week and a half. Now I'm suffering withdrawal pains waiting for a new episode. All right, Brian. Thanks a lot. And we also got some shout-outs here for Ibrahim Mohammed and his crew out there in Nigeria. How you doing, Ibrahim? We told you we'd make you famous, and now you are. We also have a couple more shouts. Parag from India, AJ from New Zealand, and Mark from Century Color Labs. Thanks for writing to us. And this is a nice, interesting email we got. Made our day. Toby Tellier from Sierra Systems said, thanks, Carl and Mark, for putting such a great show together. A couple of weeks ago, I organized a lunch hour broadcast of the .NET Rock Show on Microsoft application blocks at my company. We hooked up a laptop with speakers and gathered round to eat our lunch and tune in. It was well attended, and the topic was of particular interest to us and quite timely. The great thing about the broadcast was that it sparked some great discussion. Thanks again. All right, thank you, Toby. We'll keep making them if you keep listening. And you can read more kudos that we got from our fans at www.franklins.net/.netrocks.asp. Go to the left-hand side of the page, and you'll see a raves or a kudos page link right there. Now let's get back to our talk with Chris Sells about his book and Don's book and what he's working on these days. Right here on .NET Rocks. Don't you go away. Let me ask you this. Have you done any coding recently that you're especially proud of?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I just wrapped up the Windows Forms book.
All right.
And I did a bunch of stuff there. One of the most fun things was, this was very recent towards the end of the book, based on some reader feedback, was making the printer margin stuff actually make sense.
Huh.
Because the printer margin stuff in WinForms, if I say I want a page margin of 0 or a page bound of 0 all the way around, and a printer margin of, say, an inch, that's actually going to be variable based on the physical properties of the printer, because the print head can only go so close to the edge of the paper.
Oh yeah, right.
And on my printer, it was like a 1/4 inch on one side and 1/8 of an inch on another side. But as far as you're concerned, the print property says an inch. The whole thing is kind of off by that physical amount.
Right.
So, if you say I want a page bound of 0, you're actually getting a page bound of a 1/4 inch on the left and an 1/8 of an inch on the right.
And can you get those metrics from the settings, or?
You cannot get actually WinForms doesn't provide a way in either 1.0 or 1.1 to know what the physical characteristics of the printer are, so you can do those offsets properly.
Does the Windows API allow you to do that?
The Windows API does.
Aha.
And so what I did was I wrote a couple of helper functions that will give you the adjusted appropriate page bounds and margin bounds.
Cool.
So you can say it's an inch. By God, I want an inch.
Right.
Excellent.
And it will adjust itself properly. And
You're
so that
the man.
was fun code to write.
You're the man. That's great.
Yeah, I used to work on a reporting engine for a company called TapScan that wrote radio software. And, that was always a challenging thing to do because there was nothing written about doing printing. So I'm really glad to see some .NET books coming out that cover printing.
Actually, this book was the first time I'd ever really spent any time doing printing or graphics work of any kind. So I was just going nutso learning stuff. It was great.
That's
cool. It was so much fun.
Keeping it fresh.
The print preview is awesome in .NET.
There was one other piece of code that I wrote even more recently than the printer margin stuff, if you're interested.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So ever since I started doing the smart client hrefxe no touch deployment stuff.
Yeah, we love it.
People have been like, I'm their poster child. So whenever they run into problems, I hear about it, and that's fine. But like half of the emails were, how do I do command line arguments to my WinForms, no touch deployment applications? And you would think you could just bundle the arguments into the URL, and then somehow magically get them out again. And it turns out to be fairly complicated, especially if you want to do it in a 1.0 and 1.1 compliant way, to get those arguments out of there in the restricted security environment you've got.
That's an interesting problem.
So I built a little wrapper class that does that work for you, and you can just say, give me the arguments, and it'll either give you, if you're no-touch deployment, it'll peel them out of the URL for you, or if you're not, it'll just give you back the main arguments, and so you don't have to care where the arguments came from, right? Did somebody double-click on me in the shell? Did somebody launch me? I don't really care as an app writer. I just want the arguments, right? So I wrote some code to do that. But then, again, in that partially trusted environment, the URL is all encoded, right? Instead of space, you're going to get %20.
Right. So you have to decode it.
Right, so you have to decode it, and there's in fact at least 2 classes to do that in .NET, but in a partially trusted environment, you're not allowed to use either of them.
Ooh.
So I had to go into the .NET framework and pull out and reverse engineer the code, and package it in my class so it would properly decode the URL for you, because of course you don't want the encoded URL. That's worthless.
Now this sounds like a good place to talk about the assembly linker. Because I've been messing around with that quite a bit, and I really love it. I really love the idea that I can take that module in C# and that one in VB, and just use the code that I want and put it all into one big exe. Can you do that with framework modules as well, or do you have to actually have the source to compile a module?
So tell me this: you have been taking multiple assemblies and putting them all into one big exe?
No, not the way you're thinking. Just if I need a routine out of this DLL and, let's say it's in C#, and I have my exes in VB, I don't want to distribute the entire DLL. I just want to take that routine, compile it as a module, and link it into my exe.
So you've been, decompiling to get the IL?
No, I have the source.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But my question is, are there modules available at the .NET module extension level that you can link in these framework components?
So the last time I dug through this, there was only 1 or 2 multi-module assemblies in all of .NET.
Wow.
I mean, mostly it's just per assembly.
Right.
And, most of .NET is just built in C# anyway, and mostly multi-module assemblies are about, logically I have a single assembly. It's just physically it's in 2 different files. And the reason I do that is because that's the only way to have multi-language assemblies.
Right.
Right.
There's not really that need in .NET.
Right, but the cool thing that I'm talking about with the assembly linker is that I can actually put them all together in one, where they would be in separate.
Not in one binary.
In one exe, yeah.
Okay, so have you experimented with what happens when you take away that DLL?
No.
Yeah, see, it's not one exe.
Okay.
You are, in fact, building one.
But you still need the metadata from another.
Well, all the code, everything still lives in those DLLs. They happen to just be modules.
Ah.
So you're kind of linking in they all are part of one logical assembly. They just happen to be stored in multiple files on the file system.
And that's why we call them assemblies.
Multi-module assemblies. Right, exactly.
Right.
Most assemblies, and in fact, all of what VS.NET supports are single module assemblies.
Right.
But .NET itself supports multi-module assemblies with the assembly linker, as you've discovered.
Yeah.
But what you won't get is, pulling out a module from here and shoving it into this other exe. I mean, the file still needs to be there.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
Right. I think you just answered this, Chris, but I think you said when I would need to use this is if I've got modules that are written in different languages, but I want them to appear as one assembly.
Right.
Well, so the reason to do that is mostly a matter of, gosh, I've got this one routine over here that I only want, I want to make it internal, right? I don't want the world to have access to it. I just want it to be, other hunks of code in my assembly. But this routine is internal and is in VB, and this routine is internal and it's in C#.
Right.
And I want them to be able to talk to each other. How do I do that?
Yeah.
And the only way to do that right now in .NET is multi-module assembly.
Well, you use the assembly linker.
Yeah. And as it turns out, that's a fairly rare requirement.
Yeah.
Which is why the tools don't support it directly, or at least the GUI tool.
Right. I've actually taught a class where we did that. We wrote something in C#, something in VB, and we used the linker to tie them together into one assembly. But it was basically just kind of a demo of, hey, if you want to do this, this is how you do it.
Right. But in general, what happens is you have one assembly that's written in VB, but who cares, because it exposes a bunch of, public types with public methods.
Right.
And then you can just use those from wherever, and you don't have to.
That's true. It's not like you need to save disk space.
Right.
So
we're past that, luckily.
Let me ask you this. What do you think of the global assembly cache? And, that sounds like a flip question, but, let me tell you what my ideas are here. In the past, when we were putting our application settings in any files, Microsoft came out with the registry that they were using for their own internal purposes, and they told us, hey, don't save your settings in any files, save them in the registry. And we said, okay. And we put them in the registry, and then, somewhere along the line we had to reinstall Windows, and all our settings went away.
But the reason for
and we said, well, why shouldn't we have them in any files? And only wussies put settings in any files. The registry is where it's at.
But the reason to prefer the registry, I wrote a whole chapter on this in my book.
Okay.
So the reason to prefer, this is all historical, and I was there when it happened.
Right. So that's why I'm interested in your perspective.
Sure. So any files were great because they were a simple read-write store of settings. But that was, Windows 3.1. We only had one user.
Yes.
And COM came along, and it needed this and the shell needed this global idea of things.
That's where the registry is good.
Right, and that's where why the registry was invented. And then, as soon as this idea of global idea of things happened, well, we decided, well, gosh, we kind of want per-user ideas of things.
Okay.
And as soon as per-user came along, then we said, oh, yeah, and, we can put settings in there. So you can just logically say, whoever the current user is, I don't know, but whoever they are, these are their settings for this app. Yeah. And all the multi-user stuff just happens by the registry APIs. You don't have to do anything explicit.
Okay.
Whereas in any files, you very much did.
That's true. Okay, that's true. However, I guess there are pros and cons. And the thing is that I guess my point is that we started out with the registry being a tool for COM, and then Microsoft saying, hey, this is something that people might want to use, and people just abandoned, saving private settings in files that they had control over, and lost some control and gave up some control for that. And what I'm saying is, with the global assembly cache, it seems like this is a good idea if you're Microsoft building the .NET framework, where you need to have shared assemblies. So what are the reasons, that in what you give up by using the global assembly cache for your own components is you give up control, and you give up the ability to upgrade and provide new versions, and you get to become a little more inflexible. And what you gain is the global sort of ubiquitous thing. Okay, so that's my take on it. Okay. What do you think?
Okay, so first I have to start by saying I'm not in any way endorsing the registry.
Okay.
Right, the registry was a step up from any files because of the multi-user nature.
For that purpose, yeah.
Yes, but now the problem with the registry is that lots of different kinds of apps don't have access to it, and it makes impactful installations. Which as soon as you throw something in the registry, you need to
dependent
uninstall.
On it. Yeah.
Right, and uninstalls are bad when you want Xcopy deployment.
Yeah,
right.
It's tough to move it from one machine to another.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it's just it's a bad idea. So avoiding the registry is goodness, and .NET has a whole architecture for user settings called isolated storage.
And I'm not at all, comparing the global assembly cache to the registry.
Well, actually, I think that's a fair comparison. And in the same way that you should avoid the registry, you should also avoid the global assembly cache. The global assembly cache is for operating system level components.
Thank you.
If your component is part of the operating system, then put it in there.
Right.
But in general, we're way beyond the point where we have to worry about conserving disk space.
I'm so glad to hear you say that because, I hear so many people talk at user groups and sessions and articles and stuff on the wonders of the global assembly cache, and I'm thinking to myself, these people just aren't thinking. They're not thinking.
Well, hold on now. What if we have to write a COM Plus component that lives inside of COM Plus? Do you not have to install that component in the GAC to get all that to work?
I don't believe so.
No,
you
don't.
Don't have to install, a .NET component into the global assembly cache for COM as a whole.
It makes a COM wrapper, but it doesn't go in the GAC.
It doesn't.
Well, no, I'm
need
saying
to.
for it to run inside the COM Plus environment, to register it in a COM Plus application.
So now, this is where we really need, Tim Ewald on the phone.
Yeah, you don't have to create something in the GAC. You can test it yourself by making a COM Plus component, doing an auto, install, just by instantiating it, and go look in the global assembly cache. There's nothing in there that specifically is that wrapper, but a COM wrapper is made.
Well, even so, even if you do, there's a command line tool, and I forget what it's called, but
Yes.
you can say, okay, let COM clients create instances of this .NET component before .NET clients do, as the interop. And there's a little command line utility, and I don't believe it needs to be in the GAC for that either. In fact, I'm very sure I've run experiments where it doesn't need to be, because essentially it's doing several steps. One of which is a regasm call. And you can pass a code base to that, which just says, put the hard-coded path to this .NET component into the registry so that when COM calls co-create instance, it can find it, as opposed to making .NET bootstrap and look in the global assembly cache.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right, I'll have to try it. Every time I've done something with COM Plus, I've always stuck it in the GAC. And
you certainly can, and that'll help the assembly resolver.
Right,
I've actually
that lets
had trouble.
it find it very easily.
I've actually had trouble when I put something in the GAC and try to use it in COM Plus. I've had problems there.
Oh, what kind of problems did you have?
I can't remember now, but it was a problem where it wouldn't activate or something. It was something. I can't remember.
Well,
now.
I think the basic problem there, Carl, is that computers sense fear. So any kind of uncertainty at all, will definitely come out.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, that's certainly
you run
good info for me. I want to play around with that because as I experiment with COM Plus, I just naturally put something in the GAC before I register it in COM Plus.
Yeah, I mean, COM is really about a global registry, right? And
right.
.NET is very much not, right? It's very optional, and in fact, actively discouraged.
I could tell you one thing that's very cool is just how the CLR locates an assembly, starting with the GAC. And this is actually a question that Mark and I have had some arguments over. Not arguments, but
debates.
We're
talking about probing, right?
Yeah, we're talking about probing and how the CLR will locate an assembly. Now, the documentation says that it looks in the GAC first. And Mark said he's done some experiments where that's not the case. If you have the same DLL locally, and that is as in the GAC, it's going to load the local version first. Maybe you can put that to rest for us.
Hey, we'll get back to Chris in a minute. I want to find out what his answer is. But first I want to play a little tune, all right? It goes like this. So I got an email today from Don Awalt, who pointed me to a site on got.net.com where Microsoft is announcing a free suite of power toys for Visual Studio.net 2003. And you can't get to it from the main page. I guarantee you're interested in this. Check it out. VS Tweak allows you to modify some of the more obscure Visual Studio options and settings. With VS Tweak, you can gain access to advanced dynamic help settings, importing and exporting custom keyboard mapping schemes, making Visual Studio.net recognize custom file extensions, the ability to edit and clear most recently used file and project lists, and the ability to view and edit command window aliases. Also VS Edit, which is like a little editor, so you don't have to load a file or a set of files into Visual Studio just by double-clicking on them. So no more extra windows opening, just pure editing bliss, according to this site. Then there's also, my favorite, the VB Commenter. Adding comments to your Visual Basic source code has never been easier. After installing this power toy, you can type quote, single quote, double quote, followed by enter in the VB code editor, and the appropriate XML-style comment tags will appear. You can even create an XML file of all comments. You can even create an XML file of all comments in a given class library, ready to use with a custom help builder power toy. What is that, you say? Well, that allows you to create a custom help collection for your XML-style commented VB or C# class libraries. Your custom help will be fully integrated into Visual Studio.net 2003, so your topics will be accessible from Dynamic Help, F1, Search, Help Index, and Help Comments. And if that wasn't enough, ladies and gentlemen, it's all free. Now, what's the URL? www.got.net.com/team/IDE. All right, I'm going to take you out now. Go get it.
Well, every experiment I've ever done shows the exact opposite. That it absolutely does look in the GAC. But
In
now
your
you
face,
make me want
Don.
to sit down and write the code. Because that's how you learn things, right? You start, the way Don and I figured out how the stuff in his book works is we sat down and we started doing it.
Right.
Because his book sprang from a course he was writing for Developmentor at the time. And, that's how we learn stuff at Developmentor. We don't have access to the source code or the internal documents that Microsoft was providing. So we sat down and we started playing with it and see what happens.
Yeah. Well,
my
it is
experiments that I remember, and this is part of student labs in the Developmentor courses, is, it picks stuff from the GAC first.
Well, it's actually pretty cool how it does that. It gets all the information from the assembly, and I can imagine if I was writing that part of the CLR, I would just parse together a big long file path from the Windows directory, .NET version, GAC.
But that doesn't work because the GAC isn't one directory.
No. But then from there you
Windows
get the
and system aren't in the path for the assembly resolver anyway.
Okay, but then wouldn't you be able to find it from there? Wouldn't you be able to find it from, the .NET version and then the GAC? Oh, I'm sorry, Windows assembly. I'm sorry, Windows.
So what the assembly resolver does
GAC,
is all it
blah,
has.
blah, blah,
it's
blah.
got a 4-part name.
Right.
It's got the assembly name itself, which is no path name and not even an extension.
Right.
Right, and it's got the version number and it's got
a public key token.
The token hash, and it's got the culture information.
Right.
And it just looks where it's going to look first by file name, and when it finds that, it starts looking at whether it's been signed. It starts doing version stuff.
That's what I was trying to say, Chris. I was trying to say that it just says, is that file there? Boom. One operating system call. Does the file exist? And that is a very efficient operation versus, trudging through the registry a couple times looking for GUIDs and all the stuff that COM does to load an object.
Yeah, the registry does get a lot of flack for being a major bottleneck in the system, and it's hard to argue that. I mean, what is that wonderful site, sysinternals.com, which has all of those, like the registry, some registry tools that will tell you. I don't know if you guys have ever run this, but you can run a little tool that will tell you all of the registry calls, and just looking at the sheer number of calls into the registry just to start, Notepad, it's just frightening.
You wonder what they were smoking when they were coming up. Let's make this as complex as possible.
Yeah, I was actually sitting here struggling trying to remember what we did that made me think that it called the local one instead of the one in the GAC.
You might have had like some version incompatibilities, right? So it found it in the GAC, but it wasn't the right version.
Well, we in class this came up. Somebody asked this question, and I was telling Carl about it after we did an experiment. So we wound up making a DLL that we put a string in and compiled it with a version number, strong named it, and stuck that in the GAC. Then we changed the name of the constant that was retrievable with the property, and we we compiled it again and put a local copy, in the same bin directory with the app. And when we ran the app, it pulled the constant from the local copy.
Now, were you signing these things or not?
We weren't. What do you mean by signing? Do you mean making a strong name key? Were we strong naming it?
Yeah, and put a
yes,
they
were both strong named with the same key.
So they were both signed.
Yeah, they were both times.
Interesting. Because I've done the exact same experiment, except for what I did was I just used the app base for the assembly to figure out where in the file system .NET was finding it.
Well, we'd also been playing around with config files and setting binding through a config file.
Sure.
So we may have done something there that caused me to think that it was probing in the local bin directory before the GAC. I mean, is that possible that you could set something in the config file for an app?
Oh, absolutely.
Binding redirect.
Well, we may have an explanation then, because it's entirely possible that that's what caused it to happen. But no, the reason Carl and I were debating it is I took that as irrefutable proof that it was probing the bin directory first.
Yeah.
The reason, the config file is the master.
Well, that makes sense, because you can redirect the binding from one shared version to another in the config file. So that makes total sense.
But that's the whole, that goes to the core of the versioning philosophy of .NET, which said, in the old days, in DLL days, we left it to the vendors to decide that they were bug compatible with the old DLL and therefore could, leave the same name and put it in the same place.
Well, that was before
and that caused all kinds of problems. Yeah. And then in COM, we just said, we don't have versions. If you're implementing the same interface with the same class ID, it must be the same.
Right.
And of course, we left it to the vendor again. And what they learned from that after 2 times of trying to trust the vendor, of which they were a major vendor themselves, building incompatible DLLs, is that the version has to be a first-class citizen, and not only that, but it's only the application developer/administrator that can really decide for this app what versions of what components are really loaded.
Hey, let me ask you this: what does it mean to have a version policy that is set up? Is that just a config file setting, or is there an actual policy?
You're talking about a publisher policy?
Yeah.
So publisher policy is a shortcut in the whole version resolution, where the publisher themselves can, unless you turn it off in the config file, it's on by default, where the publisher can publish a new version of the component, and then they can publish like a config file that they bundle into a DLL, essentially. And they can put that in the GAC. So,
Ooh.
When your app is binding against 1.1, the publisher can put a little config file into a DLL and put that in the GAC and say, no, 1.2 we promise is fine. And by default, that will work. That's called the publisher policy.
Okay, very cool.
But in the config file, if you don't trust publishers, vendors of third-party components, you can turn that off.
Nice.
It's just a big Frankenstein switch.
So
Which is somewhat coarse-grained, but does the job.
I have a very important question for you, Chris.
All right.
What did you think about The Matrix Reloaded?
So, to tell you that story, I have to tell you this one.
Okay.
Wait, does this involve you naked with a laptop?
No.
I don't want to hear that story, man, all right?
So in 1999, I had just moved into my new house. And we had this wonderful family room, with a fireplace and couches and no real entertainment system of any kind. And then my wife bought me a DVD player for Father's Day. And, you can't really have a DVD player without some kind of a sound system. And along with the DVD player, she also got me The Matrix, which was really, the DVD that made DVDs, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it was the first
absolutely.
DVD to hit 1 million copies. So, you can't really have a DVD player and The Matrix without the sound system to go along with it, because the sound is so amazing in The Matrix. So I had to go and, spend several $1,000s on the sound system, but you can't really have the sound system without the surround sound speakers.
The speakers.
So that's another couple of $1,000s to get all the right stuff and have it wired and hidden in the ceiling and all that. And then, but there's nowhere to really put the sound system.
Oh, no.
Unless you have shelves all set up, built in, looks nice with the rest of the house. And you can't just put it on the one half of the room. You have to really balance the room and put it on both
So
halves.
the bulldozer showed up and knocked out the wall. And
So $5,000 later,
oh, my God.
I'm watching, a 1995 CD.
You could just bought a ticket to the movie theater for $10.
Yeah. Well,
You
of course
could
I
have
did
bought
that
the movie
several times.
theater,
And in fact, when The Matrix first came out, I happened to be at a Developmentor event in Los Angeles on opening night after 10 o'clock when we had been teaching, and we didn't know a thing about it. We hadn't seen the previews. We wandered into opening night in Los Angeles to The Matrix.
Wow.
And it was like walking into, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. People
Right.
were shouting,
Right.
at the audience, when Neo was handed the option, right? Do you want the red pill or the blue pill? Somebody in the back of the audience was like, "Take the red pill." I mean, it was just a party. We loved it so much we went back the next night. And, it became an indelible part of the Windows developer culture. Now, so to say that I liked The Matrix is somewhat of an understatement. Right? I mean, the not only was the action just jaw-droppingly amazing, but, the idea when Neo woke up in his cocoon, it was like a bolt of lightning. It was like, oh my God, right? My whole philosophy of life changed at that point, which, has happened to quite a few people. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the intervening 4 years, a bunch of people who, were not very philosophical or spiritual in any way have suddenly taken up the ideas in this movie. I mean, these guys have tapped into a vein of unrealized spiritualism in this whole country, potentially the whole world. I don't know.
So what did you think of the new one?
So I liked it.
So we went from religious experience to, it was okay.
The second story was a little short. Maybe we could chop down the first story to a few words. All right. I have one more very important question for you. You vegetarian?
I'm not.
Okay. Where's the best
Have you seen
place?
the size of me?
Yeah.
Nobody
okay.
could give me my size and just eat vegetables.
Well, a lot of refried beans, maybe. I don't know. Where's the best place in Oregon to get a cheeseburger?
The best place in Oregon to get a cheeseburger.
Let's narrow it down to your town.
No, I understand that. I'm trying. I'm just thinking of Portland, right? All
Okay.
of Oregon is
Okay.
that one little city on the northern border with Washington. So you know what? I can't. Well, my house, frankly.
All right,
I got a grill
okay.
on my back porch. I make the best cheeseburgers in town.
All right. Well, next time I'm in Oregon, I'm coming to your house.
Feel free.
Yeah.
Feel free.
With my appetite. Well, Chris, man, this has been an incredible show. Is there any last minute anything that you want to tell anybody?
Oh, I just want to say, if you're into wind forms, check out the new release of Ghengis. We're at
Ghengis?
0.4, and it doubles in functionality every release.
And one more time, what is Ghengis?
Ghengis is a set of shared source that has been kind of gathered together. It's mostly for adding application framework features, like the things that used to be in MFC
Right.
that .NET forgot for building, document-centric applications. It's mostly for building those features back into applications. But all my code for, handling command line arguments with hrefxes is in Ghengis.
Great.
And just command line switch handling in general is in Ghengis, and wizards and...
And I understand the price is right, too, huh?
Oh, yeah, it's short source. It's all there. It's free. Help yourself. Do whatever you want with it. If you make
Cool.
money on it, as reshipping it, there's a separate license. But in general, you can just ship it and, use it in your stuff and enjoy.
Well, I got to share this with you just before we part here, that I spent a good amount of time honing a MIDI tool in VB.NET that calls the multimedia API to do MIDI output.
Uh-huh.
And it also does filtering and transposing on the fly and routing. So it's a very cool thing. And I just was looking for a killer app to go along with this.
Sure.
And I have a daughter who's now 14 months old. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we haven't killed her yet, which is good.
Also, congratulations.
Yeah. And she's number 2, actually. First one's 7 years old. She's beyond death now. So
She survived.
she
Darwin
survived.
Is right.
She survived. Anyway, I made this little bubble machine. So when Clara comes up, it's a black screen. It's a Windows form that's full screen with no border, and it's a black background. And you move the mouse, and it makes random filled shaded spheres and plays a random note. Actually, not a random note. The notes are dependent on the Y coordinate. So they go up when the mouse goes up and down when the mouse goes down. And nice bubbles on the screen. Also responds to keyboard. So she loves just whacking the keyboard and making bubbles. And she's absolutely fascinated by it.
That is a great app. There used to be something like that on the Apple II.
Cool.
Yeah, that I would spend hours with.
You, personally?
Yeah, I was much younger.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Well, I
very
feel
good.
so bad. What I did for my son when he was younger is I made a screen that had a Pikachu character that bounced around.
Sure.
And if he could click it with the mouse, I would make it explode. And he got hours of fun out of that.
Sure. Well, so it's hard to segue back to this other topic after that, Mark. But, Carl, if you want to take your MIDI stuff and contribute it to Ghengis, because there's
Love
hardly
to.
any multimedia stuff.
Man, I'd love to.
So, package it up and we'll get it into Ghengis.
Absolutely. You got
That's
it.
exactly the kind of thing, right? It's very much, application features that .NET forgot.
Cool. Well, I got a few more things at my belt, too.
By the way, I wanted, when you first introduced me, right, you said we loved having him here last time.
Yeah.
It's great to have him back. Have you ever, had a guest back where you didn't say that right away?
There's only been 2. You and Bill Vaughn are
Right.
the only 2 repeat guests so far.
Oh, okay.
So I really can't say that about Bill either.
But you had him back anyway.
Yeah, no. What I mean is I can't say I'm not glad to have you back.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe I have too many negatives there, but no, I wouldn't say that to Bill. And we didn't. So there you go.
All
Well,
right.
if we didn't like you, we're not going to have you back.
Hey,
Well, I was
really,
gonna say, it
uh,
would be really great to open up with, we had him here last time and he really sucked.
we couldn't
Here he is again.
we
We thought
couldn't
we'd give
get
him
anyone
another
else.
chance.
Everybody
he was
else was
available because
busy.
he's not really doing anything and no one likes him. So we called him.
We couldn't get a real guest. Oh, man. I'm going to burn in hell. All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Yep, bye.
You rock.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Bye.